Welcome to You and Your Money. I'm Bryan Hurst. This evening we're focusing on the healthcare industry. The challenges at retirement are how to make our funds last longer. However, inflation and longevity are the problems when healthier lifestyles and advancements in medical medicine. We're all living longer. Life expectancy has improved in the last 25 years, and the statistics show at least from age 66 to 73. The danger for so many people living longer is how to deal with above inflation increases in medical aid. And joining me this evening is Dr. Ron Whelan, Chief Executive Officer of Discovery Health. Ron, good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Bryan.
As I said at the beginning, this is a real problem for people getting older because, if you look at their budgets and you look at the increases, you've got food inflation, but the one area that's really above inflation is medical aid costs. And the question is, how would you see it that elderly people, you got parents, are they alive? And their ages? I'm just asking you,
Yeah, my parents are 74 now this year.
Okay, so how are they dealing with increases in medical aid? How are they going to deal with between now and the next 10 to 15 years?
It's a very important question, Bryan, and I think the first thing to note in the medical scheme industry in South Africa is we run a community-rated medical scheme industry, which means that my parents' contributions are exactly the same as my contributions if we're on the same plan. Now think about that. I'm now 48 years old, my parents are 74 years old. We pay exactly the same contribution for the same plan series. And what that does is it means that our contributions are not risk rated. Now take, for example, in life insurance, as you age and as you become more sickly, your premiums go up exponentially. That doesn't happen in the medical scheme market in South Africa. So there's equilibrium across the contributions. And admittedly, medical scheme contributions do go up at more than inflation on an annual basis, typically somewhere around consumer price inflation plus 3 or 4%. And the reason for that is that overall our populations are aging over time, as point number one. Point number two is that medical technology typically escalates at higher than inflation on an annual basis. And then as people consume more healthcare, you get an added effect on that inflation. So that's the primary reason that we see greater than inflationary increases in medical scheme contributions. Now, what's important to recognize as you get older is that your risk profile changes. There are more chronic diseases, there's more risk of cancer, there's more risk of needing operations. For example, my mother, unfortunately, 2 years ago had a breast cancer diagnosis at the age of 72. She's recently had to have back surgery because she suffers from severe osteoarthritis. And those things happen when you get older. So as you're getting older, your medical scheme contributions become even more important than they were when you were younger.
Your need to have healthcare cover in the 70s going through to the 80s. But the point I'm making, at a 9% inflation increase on medical aid, your medical aid will double in 8 years' time, which means your parents are 74. That means at 90, they're going to be paying 4 times what they're paying now.
That is unfortunately the reality, and we work hard to try and keep those contribution increases as low as possible on an annual basis, and we have a range of levers across the medical scheme industry and indeed Discovery Health to try and keep the contribution increases as low as possible. I think it's important for your viewers to recognize that a medical scheme effectively runs as a not-for-profit. So all of the money in a medical scheme is members' money, and our job as medical scheme administrators is to make sure that the monies collected on an annual basis through contributions equals the monies spent on an annual basis across the healthcare needs of members. So medical schemes, the ideal point for a medical scheme on an annual basis is a break-even point. So I have no incentive to not pay claims, but at the same time have an incentive to reduce healthcare consumption and expenditure so that we can keep the next year's contribution increases as low as possible.
But you don't really, you do agree, we don't really have a solution.
Well, I think we certainly need to drive efficiencies across the healthcare system. So I think we have an obligation.
That's to try and keep premium increases lower.
Exactly.
But we've seen over the last 20, 30 years always a 2-3% above inflation.
And that unfortunately is the price we pay for living longer, for better medical technology. And I think you can see across the world, our lifespans are increasing by an average about 4 months per year. So people are living longer. We're seeing in the US now, for example, over 100,000 people over the age of 100 years old. That's increased by 50% over the last 10 years. So there is a price to pay for our longevity, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know, the Queen used to send telegrams when you got to 100. I'm not sure the King's doing that at all. But Ron, so let's just talk about, there is one way which may not be popular. You guys have got a lot of network doctors where you've arranged a process, a payment with those doctors equal to what the medical aid will pay on behalf of the member.
Well, that's exactly.
Okay, so the difficulty really is for so many people who are not with specialists who are network, they're going to pay the higher costs. It's a difficult one for an older person to be told, look, the doctor you're going to is charging more, why don't you go to a network doctor? Because you build a relationship and a trust with a particular doctor. How are you getting that message through to members? Guys, you know, individually, is there a way of saying to one of your members, hey, we just want you to know that if you'd had a network doctor, maybe you wouldn't have had to pick up all these costs? Is there any system in place?
Yeah, it's a very important point, Bryan. And I think it's important to think of networks on two fronts. The first place to think about networks is we have network arrangements with specific hospital groups and across specific plans. For instance, the Key Care Plan and the Delta Series plans. And there what we do is we negotiate with hospital groups around the lowest possible tariffs across those plans, so long as members access those particular facilities available across those network plans. We pass that discount through directly to members in the form of lower contribution increases. So the first part is to think about network facilities. The second part that you speak about is network doctors. And doctors work in hospitals but run separately to hospitals. So for instance, if you get admitted to hospital, there will be a hospital bill and there will be a bill for the doctor. There will also be a radiology bill and a pathology bill.
And don't forget an anaesthetist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the anaesthetist is a doctor as well. So what we do is we contract doctors into specific network arrangements. And the reason we do that is, number one, to improve efficiencies across the healthcare system. Number two is to improve certainty around what you can expect to pay. So for instance, if you go to a network doctor who's contracted in on the Discovery Health rate, you will have certainty around what you will be paying for that doctor. It's also important to point out that our networks for doctors are open, and all doctors can join any of the networks across Discovery, so long as they agree to abide by the specific tariffs across those networks. So
Ron, let me make one point. People mustn't think network doctors are inferior doctors.
No, not at all.
Some of the top doctors, specialists, are network doctors.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're very privileged in South Africa to have some of the best doctors in the world and brilliant doctors, and our networks are very broad and very deep, with excellent doctors across the networks. Going to a doctor that's contracted in with Discovery by no means means that you're receiving inferior quality. In fact, in many respects, you're receiving higher quality, because what we've done is we've worked alongside those doctors around specific tariff arrangements. We've worked alongside those doctors to ensure that the quality and standards of their practices are high. We have close working relationships with those doctors. So on the contrary, you receive excellent care out of doctors who are contracted in with the Discovery Health rate. Are
you working on increasing the pool? Is that something you guys
As I said, the networks are completely open. We continually grow the networks. We continually invite additional doctors and providers into the networks. They're already very, very broad. And only a small proportion of doctors would contract out of our network arrangements. And as I say, it's a benefit to the doctor as well. So the doctor has certainty that the patient sitting in front of them has certainty of payment from the patient sitting in front of them. If you're not a network doctor, you don't have certainty that you're going to receive payment for that. And bad debt is a big issue in medical practice.
That you don't have to run a book and all those type of things. So now when you talk about network doctors and we talk about doctors, are we going to retain these doctors with the dangers of the NHI in its current form being passed? I mean, apparently it's on our president's desk waiting for signature.
Well, simply put, we must retain our doctors. We have a brilliant healthcare system, we have a brilliant pool of doctors, and we must make sure that the market is set up to retain all doctors and indeed all healthcare professionals in South Africa. At the same time, we must retain investor confidence in South Africa, and healthcare is an important part of investor confidence in South Africa. So the NHI has certainly raised some concerns and alarm across the healthcare sector as well as across the economy more broadly. I mean, it's probably important for me to just articulate some of the facts around the NHI and how it's currently set up, and some of the concerns we have around the implementation and the proposals in the NHI. The first question to ask around the NHI is how we raise the additional 200 billion rand that's required to fund the NHI. And raising 200 billion rand across a relatively narrow tax base is a significant task. So in order to raise 200 billion rand for NHI, we would need to increase PAYE by somewhere around 30%, 31%. Or we could increase the VAT rate from 15% to 21.5%. Or we could increase payroll taxes by tenfold. And when one thinks about all of those levers for raising the 200 billion rand that's required to fund the NHI, it doesn't seem reasonable. So there's work to be done on crafting the funding mechanism for NHI, and we're still waiting for National Treasury to develop that money bill, the so-called money bill for NHI. So that's the first part that you need to consider when you're thinking about NHI implementation. The second part of NHI implementation is, even if we were to raise the 200 billion rand that has been proposed by the National Department of Health, the 200 billion rand would not get us to the level of universal health coverage that we aspire towards in the NHI. So it would mean that the average healthcare expenditure available for the population would move from somewhere around 400 rand per life per month to around 700 rand per life per month. And if you take that 700 rand per life per month, that is well below the current cost of prescribed minimum benefits, which are costed at 1,100 rand per life per month. So you can see, even if we've got 200 billion rand in the system, we're below the prescribed minimum benefit threshold.
Ron, let's just put a pin there. We need to go take a break. We're going to take a break. I hope you're enjoying our program this evening. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.